Hello, hello. My name is April Malone, and I'm with Yes, I Work From Home, and this is the podcast. Today, I have with me a public school teacher from Wisconsin, Amber Van Hale. Amber, thank you for coming today.
Thanks for having me, April.
So, I like to go back to like our how we know each other story. So, I was a substitute teacher, and I was in the lunchroom grabbing my lunch and heading back up to the classroom to do my prep for the next hour. And then Amber found me. And what happened, Amber? You tell the story.
My job, I had the delightful job of checking student IDs because only seniors were allowed to leave the cafeteria. And so I stopped April and asked her for her student ID because I thought she was actually a student, and she was not.
And then we became friends over the moment. Actually, I like we should just go and tell that other story. It's our favorite. So Amber and I, we were both single women living in a small town and kind of new to the area, more or less, right? It was
Yeah,
your first year of teaching, I think.
it was, yes.
So we hit it off well enough to like go hang out. I think we were just gonna do like a movie night one night, right? And I don't know, was this like our first time actually officially hanging out or maybe like the second?
I don't remember, but we were at my apartment
Yes,
and
and we heard
heard
this
scratching noises.
and we were like, what is that? I don't even remember what movie we're watching. I think we abandoned it because and we kept hearing scratchy noises. How did we discover what it was?
I don't know. That apartment had the craziest layout. It had like a catwalk around the second floor. And so,
Wasn't it like a renovated school that got turned into apartment
yes,
buildings that chopped up? So we had like this two-story apartment building with super high ceilings, which was
right.
pretty amazing.
It was cool, but
Yeah.
strange.
So we got up on the
And
catwalk.
we got up on the catwalk and saw this little pile of stuff and with our flashlights, and then realized that a number of bats had gotten in between the two panes of windows.
And these windows weren't just any windows, they were huge and they were old. So
Yes.
we thought we would try to like open the window and release the bats to the outside, but we opened them the wrong way and they came they came in.
Yes, they did.
How many bats was it? Do you remember?
I don't too many. Too
It
many
was like
bats
14.
flying all over.
It was like 14. And we got the landlord involved and he came in because we couldn't get the last ones out. And he got bit in the hand, which was great. So we're
Yes.
like trying to save a bat in a plastic bag, like telling him to go be seen, but I don't know if he ever did.
Oh,
So that
yeah.
was back when we both lived in Austin, Minnesota. But now, tell us where you are now.
I live in West Central Wisconsin now, in a smaller town than Austin,
Wow.
actually.
And
So,
so you're a public school teacher, and
yes.
just tell us your story. How many years have you been teaching?
I am in starting my 15th year of teaching, but my 10th year of teaching virtually for a virtual public charter school here in Wisconsin.
Yes, and that's why you're on the Yes, I Work From Home podcast. Because you've
Yes.
been doing this for
Yes.
like, did you just say 10 years?
Yes. 10 years. This is the start of my 10th year.
All right, let's talk about how that happened. Because were virtual schools a big deal 10 years ago?
Our school was way, way, way smaller. I mean, they existed, but not to the extent and popularity that they do now.
How did you find that position?
I had moved to Wisconsin from Minnesota and was looking I was looking for a teaching job and kind of was just applying where in jobs in the area where I was living and happened upon this one on the job listing site and applied for it. Um, and it was the job that I got. So that's the job I have.
How many years had that school been in existence before you were hired? Like, did they have some things established before you came in? Did they give you proper training?
I it was like I think the third year, so it had been in like 2 years prior to my starting. I think, and It was still really small. Like I was a half-time teacher when I started, and there was another full-time high school English teacher, and that was it.
Oh, wow.
We were like one and a half positions.
Mhm.
So everybody wore a lot of hats
Mhm.
at that point. And so one of the teachers who was like a founding teacher, like, started when the school started, one of the math teachers kind of became like my mentor
Right.
just because she knew what I needed to do to get started. So,
Mhm. What kind of equipment do they give you? They're like, "Okay, you're gonna be online teacher. Here's what you need."
I was given, ironically, as a part-time teacher, I wasn't going to be given anything, but here, do this job, but we're not going to give you any equipment. But then they kind of like changed their minds. And so like they gave me a laptop, and like a voice over IP phone and a printer.
Mhm. But
And
any office equipment? No?
no.
All right.
Well, I guess actually they also gave me like a router to start out with.
Okay,
So
okay.
that was nice because I was like, I don't have like really anything.
Did you
So
have to cover your own internet bill, or was there any kind of like
throughout my time, there has been a stipend for it, and then the stipend went away, and then the stipend came back. But it is just a stipend. It's not enough to actually cover
Mhm.
my entire internet bill. So
All right. So how did it go that first year?
the first year was a little crazy. Even as a part-time teacher, I was teaching 5 English classes, and um also doing some credit recovery work with a program that they were like piloting at the time. Um, so trying to figure out how that all worked and all sorts of things.
Now, this is a fully virtual school. We're not talking like a physical school that just has an online program. So let's talk about what kind of options do your kids have? I know you've told me a little bit. I want to hear about some of the extracurricular things that they have.
So we have a lot of what you would think of, like when you think of high school, you think, okay, well, yes, there's classes, right? But I mean, we have a student council that meets virtually and sometimes, in non-COVID years, plans like face-to-face events. We have like a fall dance. We have prom. We have a National Honor Society that I'm like a co-advisor of. We have, again, in non-COVID, have like a face-to-face graduation ceremony where everyone comes to, we're actually a charter school, so to our authorizing district high school, and we have the gym and all the graduation-y things.
Mm.
So kind of those milestone things you think of when you think of like, wow, high school wouldn't be high school without, like, we don't have a football team, but the big things, um like we still have, we really look to, have it be like a full experience for students. We also have other clubs as well, but like the student council and National Honor Society have been around the longest.
And those are the ones that you're most involved with as well.
I'm not involved as much with the student council, but National Honor Society, yep, I've been doing
Hmm.
that for, I think this is the 9th year that I have been doing that.
So you're home 95% of the time, and then you travel every once in a while for these big events in normal years.
um I would say I'm home maybe like 90% of the time. Since we are a public school, we are required to have our students participate in the state standardized testing, which means that all of our students come to locations that we kind of set up around the state. So we try to have it so that the students don't have to drive more than an hour. Wisconsin is a big state,
Hmm.
and so we have testing sites. I'll put that in air quotes there, that we set up. But basically, what it is we set up a computer lab or multiple computer labs with computers and like a big Proctor caching machine and all sorts of things, in libraries, in community colleges, in whatever kind of larger buildings we can find, in the various communities that we go to. And then the families come for one day or sometimes more than one day to do that. And so the teachers have to go and proctor all of those tests. And then also, when students don't show up, we have to sometimes even go to the students' community and like test them individually at like the public library.
Now, you have the students only drive no more than 1 hour, but do you have to drive all over the state of Wisconsin, or do the teachers kind of split it up into districts?
We actually we have a woman who her entire job is to be our testing coordinator. And so she is amazing at her job and really works to kind of keep us also within an hour, because like our classes don't stop.
Oh,
It's not because like I may be testing in a city an hour away, but all my students who live in, say, Milwaukee, they're not testing that day. So they are still having school. So we have to kind of keep going along. So as much as possible, they try to keep us kind of within that hour and a half distance. But sometimes, like because I don't have a family, I'm willing to travel just because, I don't have to worry about who's going to take care of my kids or whatever, to do testing as well.
so I understand you're living alone. Can you talk a little
Yes.
bit about what it's like to work from home while you're the only person in the home?
Uh, it's nice to be the only person in the home. I do have two cats, so sometimes they become a little bit of a hassle. But it's nice. Like I have a 3-bedroom apartment, and when I got my apartment, I was looking for that so I could have like a room kind of dedicated to be like my office space, and it's kind of my craft room too, but like having a room that's not my bedroom to be working in, um, and just being able to not have to worry about like is somebody going to come in behind me or whatever, be popping up. I know some of my colleagues have other situations
Right.
where they have to be dealing with that.
Yeah, I'm all about positioning so that like if there are family members that they're not gonna I have a little girl. She's not always fully dressed. And so it's very convenient to have the door to my side so that I can block her before she
Yes.
comes onto camera. And I teach English in online as an ESL teacher, like for China. And a lot of times you'll see these families like just walking around, and in the summer it's very hot. They don't always have air
Hmm.
conditioning. And so like not everyone is fully clad. And sometimes you'll see like parents like army crawling across the floor thinking that the teacher can't see them, but maybe we can. So have you had many experiences like that just as a teacher, like trying to like help your students understand like the privacy for their family or anything like that?
So the platform that our school is currently using doesn't have the best video.
Mm-hmm.
And so oftentimes teachers don't even go on video for the entire class,
Oh,
because it slows down
right.
the whole thing, and then everybody's garbled and
Yeah.
delayed and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I will go on camera if I really want to make a point,
Uh-huh.
and my students know that. I'm like, listen to me.
Okay.
But most of the time, students aren't on camera. We do like before class starts, we'll just be chatting, just talking or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. Even a lot of our students don't even use their microphones. It's
Oh
kind of
wow.
strange.
So a lot of
Um,
chatting like in
a
the
lot of chatting. Um, but occasionally a kid will say like, "Oh, can I show something on camera?" And um, we did have a student one time who like went on. He's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not wearing a shirt." And I was like, "Oh, dude, buddy, like clothes are not optional when you're in school."
right.
So sometimes we do have to have those conversations, but so far it's not ever really been anything too awkward.
Good. Yeah, one of the companies that I've worked for doesn't have, when we have adult clients, there's like up to 6 people in one class, and none of them are ever on camera. And you get really good at listening. It's kind of like being on a
Mhm.
conference call. Is that kind of what your situation is then most of the time?
Yeah, like some students will use their microphones. You do a lot of reading. You do a lot of like you got to be up on your texting kind of lingo, because
Oh,
like as much as you want to, as much as we tell the kids, like
complete
please
sentences.
or to attempt to just write out the words like complete sentences. Yes, that would be amazing.
This is
But
English
if you could
class.
just like type the word, that would be great too. And kind of reading like phonetic spelling. I work with a lot of struggling readers and writers, and so like they're trying,
Hmm.
but sometimes you kind of got to try to say it in your head to, oh yeah, that's what you meant.
Got
Okay.
it. Yeah. Awesome. So you have two cats. Do your students know your animals?
Oh yes, yes.
And let's talk about social life a little bit. Like you said you're living alone and you got your cats. Do you get out very often? I know in non-COVID years. What is that like for you in a small town?
So I've kind of like curated, I guess, like this a social life for me that like works for me. I'm not a hugely social person. Um, so like I in non-COVID like would go to breakfast Saturday morning. I would go out to breakfast and I go to breakfast pretty much the same time to the same restaurant every week. And so I get my pancakes and it was to the point where like, oh yeah, like they're bringing me my Diet Coke before I even sit down. Like so like, kind of getting to know the servers, getting to know the people there. And it's kind of strange, but it's like, yeah, you have like this kind of conversation going. And so, like, just I would eat out like a couple times a week in different places and, kind of getting to know the employees at the restaurants. I love my library. So I know all the library people and kind of just chatting with them. And then I was active like in my church as well. So like Bible studies and that kind
Hmm.
of thing. But yeah.
My mom is in a super small town, and that's part of her routine is you are intentional about building relationships with the people that you see as you go and run your errands. So she knows everyone at the bank and the grocery store, and you go
Hmm.
to the same gas station and they all know you. And I think that's one way that people can build community is just being intentional about having that routine. What
Yep.
about online? Are you connected with your teachers or other friends online?
So Facebook, sadly, is I probably spend way too much time there. And then like during the day, we certainly like we have email, but that's more like official kinds of things. And then we do also have instant messaging, an instant messaging program that we use, and that's more just like, oh, what is happening? What is going on? Or just kind of that internal scream that you just have no matter what your job is. You just have those days, right? And so, uh, certainly used for like schooly kind of things as well, but just the um, converse, like just getting to know each other, conversation, friendship, and our school leadership actually, like our principal and associate principal, are actually very good at um not only recognizing like, hey, wow, family said this great thing about you, but also, oh, this great thing is happening with this person, or whatever it might be, kind of sharing life things that are happening that are good.
Like
So
milestones? Is it acknowledged like via email or how do you guys do that?
every other week we have like high school staff meetings, and so those usually kind of start out with like celebrations of various kinds. So
Right, good. Let's talk about when you first started. We talked a little bit about your equipment. How did you choose how you're going to set up your desk? Like, did they give you any advice about how to do it to be comfortable since it was going to be like long term with a laptop?
so I vaguely recall there was like a 15-minute module in my, new employee training, to like how to how to not multitask and do all, they were like, don't multitask and here's how to, set up your desk or whatever. But my initial setup was I literally had a laptop and a chair from my parents, like our kitchen table growing up, on my desk that I had in college. That's one of those buy in a box and easily assemble at home, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I realized after a while that that wasn't working because I was having like huge pain in my neck and whatever. And it's like, went to go see a chiropractor and they're like, hi, maybe you shouldn't hunch over your computer all the time. And so at that point, I got like an external mouse and I got an external keyboard, and it was the wireless kind so that I could lift it up a little bit. Eventually, um, my dad built me this super cool like stand that has a little shelf for me to put my laptop on so I can sit on my chair and like look at the screen as opposed to like look way down at the screen. Um, and then a few years ago, I just went crazy and actually bought a real office chair instead of the kitchen chair from like 1970.
Do you still have the pain?
I don't. I try to be pretty conscious about like how I'm sitting and stuff. Sometimes I realize that like I'm leaning forward and I can tell if I start doing that. But I'm like, okay, well, you can't wreck yourself
Mm-hmm.
doing this job. So
Is that something that other teachers talk about? Like, I feel like a lot of people have to discover that on their own, that they needed to be a little bit more ergonomic. And that's one of the reasons I want to have this community, is to like bring awareness to that. Like, almost every single person talks about their chair and how terrible it was. And after so many months of having to go to the chiropractor or massage therapist, then all of a sudden, like, you know what? Maybe I need a better chair.
it's not something that we really talk about. Like the big thing is like how many monitors do you have? That's like the I don't know, the peer pressure or whatever. Like I got three, look at me. Um, but it's not really like how are they arranged? Are they good? Are they appropriate distance or height or anything like that? It's more just the number.
You mentioned that you love the library. Are you part of any book clubs or anything like that?
I am not part of a library book club. I have some friends that I met at like a summer institute a few years ago that we occasionally discuss. Like we get together on Zoom and we talk because they're kind of all over the country. But originally we were talking about books. Now with just the insanity of everyone trying to teach online when the rest of them are brick and mortar teachers, we're like, yeah, maybe we just meet and support one another just in talking and stuff. Um, I am in the Friends of the Library, which does lots of just activities, not necessarily book clubs,
Book
but
sales
things to
and stuff.
support the library. Yep.
I was going to ask you about, what are you guys doing this year when you don't have all of your regular extracurricular activities in person? What will you do this year?
For school,
Yeah.
we are having like not really sure how this is going to work, but we're having like a virtual picnic instead of like our fall school picnic this year. So, and we have people at our school called advisors, and they are going to be holding like more like social kinds of things once a month. Um, our National Honor Society actually hosts something called High School Hangout, which we've always done. But the National Honor Society students, kind of make trivia rooms or game rooms and then host it for their fellow students. So we're still trying to have like social opportunities. Last year we had to have a virtual graduation, which was very different, but we tried to incorporate as many elements as we have in our face-to-face graduation as we could. So I mean, as as a virtual school teacher, you get very good at looking at, okay, here's what either I used to do in brick and mortar, or here's what brick and mortar school teachers do, and how can I adapt that to work in the virtual environment? Because most things aren't set up to be virtual, they need to be tweaked.
And you were just talking about your brick and mortar friends who are teaching for the first time virtually. Are you finding a lot of brick and mortar teachers are going to those of you who are kind of more experienced with being online, coming to you for advice, or is everyone just trying to wing it and figure it out for themselves?
It kind of depends upon like the situation and the subject. Like my friends, one teaches elementary music, one's a culinary arts teacher. So I was like, how are you doing that online? And one is a chemistry teacher. So we've been talking about like, okay, what kinds of things can you do online? Like, how do I read a book to my students. I have a friend from Bible study who is teaching second grade, and she is in our local school district here. She is one of the second, third grade teachers. Like they did crazy things to like set it up so like families that chose the virtual only option, she is teaching that. And so we had like an hour long conversation before school started just about, she's like, how do you even do this? So again, it's like teachers realizing that they do have a lot of the resources to do it. It's just using those resources in a different way. So my second grade teacher friend said, oh yeah, we have all kinds of like digital things that I usually put up on the smartboard in class. I'm like, well, there you go. Put it on your screen there. That's you can do that. So sometimes it's just a matter of like me asking questions and kind of like thinking through like what do you already have? You don't have to reinvent the wheel necessarily.
Do you feel like when you are an online teacher that you have maybe kind of like developed a little bit more street credibility, street cred this year, like as far as like being recognized as a teacher?
I think yeah, a little bit. It's still really it's still different. I will say yes, but it's still different because we are a fully virtual online, like all the time online school, not well, it's an option for you this year, or we're a hybrid, or whatever. So we have a lot of systems in place that aren't in place in like a brick and mortar trying to do virtual, and certainly not to denigrate any brick and mortar teacher who is like attempting the virtual or hybrid, because quite honestly, I have heard of teachers having to like teach online and a classroom at the same time.
That's exactly what our school is doing this year.
And I'm like, that is ridiculous. Okay. I'm going to put it out there because you teach I've done both, not at the same time, but you teach totally differently. If you are teaching online, you may teach the same quote unquote lesson, but it's completely different the way you set it up and the way you structure it if you're going to teach it online versus if you're going to teach it to a classroom full of students. And if you're trying to do both at the same time, I quite honestly, I cannot wrap my head around how you do that. So anybody who's trying to do that right now, more power to them.
And monitor the children and make sure that they're being appropriate and social distancing and also being clean. And I know one way that they're trying to make it a little easier is to at least break up the small groups according to online versus in person, but still then you have to think about levels, and that gets a little tricky. So sometimes you might have your higher readers and your struggling readers not all in the same, space.
Right.
So it's tricky. I have a lot of respect for anyone who is making it happen and keeping, a happy face the whole time. Right. And then you got parents. So I got messages about two of my children this week. One of them was turning off her camera, and we didn't know. And with our platform, we are expected to keep our cameras on most of the time. And then the other one, he would leave. Like, he would log in. Like, we would always check and make sure, oh, you're in your class on time. And then he would like log off, and we wouldn't know, because a lot of times we make him wear his headset so we don't have to listen to the teacher like blaring through the house. We want him to have a headset so that we're like all not having to listen to his lesson. But then we didn't know when he would be logging out. And she told me, yeah, he's kind of like leaving for 5 minutes in the middle of class, and it's kind of critical that he's there. Thank you for letting me know. Thank you. Because we just didn't know.
Yes. That is the biggest struggle that I have. The biggest struggle is getting them to log in the first place. The second biggest struggle is getting them to engage, getting students to engage in the class. So just because their name is there doesn't necessarily mean that the student themselves is there. Like, I have had kids leave and like we will be in a one-on-one session, and I had a student one time leave to, I was like, go feed his dog or something. I don't even know. And I was like, hello, are you there? Can you hear me? Doing all my little things that I do to like
Yeah.
get him to respond. And there was nothing. And he finally came back. He's like, oh, sorry, I had to feed my dog. I'm like, who did you think was going to like, it's just you and me in this session. Like nobody was going to pick up your slack or whatever. So
Yep.
it's frustrating at times.
Let's talk about the technology. You mentioned that the platform that you use isn't really great with video. Is it the
Mm-hmm.
same platform that you started with 10 years ago, or have they changed it along the way?
It is the same platform. It has gone through one significant upgrade. And the school is currently piloting a brand new platform that they're still kind of building. So we were supposed to start with it, but then there were some glitches. And when we have so many students coming brand new to our school, we decided that also having glitches would not be a good like start off to the school year. And so we're
Right.
sticking with the old one for a while until
Hmm.
they're sure that the new one is a little more trouble
Stable.
free, stable.
So there are a lot of learning management systems out there, but they're just having to build one of their own.
No, there's so we use Desire to Learn as like our LMS, our learning management system. So that's where our the way our classrooms are how or our classes are in there. You know, there's Canvas, there's Schoology, there's Google Classroom, there's so many. Um, and they all basically do the same thing. It's just a matter of they look a little different, whatever. And then we have used a different platform, like that doesn't have a synchronous, like online classroom setting kind of thing.
Okay.
So we have used Blackboard Collaborate for many, for the whole time, past 10
Hmm.
years. And we are now like transitioning to, it's a newer platform that it wasn't like they didn't build it specifically for us, but they're taking input because there are going to be so many users, and like what do the teachers want and that kind of thing, because software developers thinking about like, oh well, you wouldn't want kids to be able to move things on the board, and then the elementary teachers are saying, oh but we would, because we would like to do matching things, or blending words, or whatever we're going to do, we would like them to be. So there's kind of been a lot of back and forth like that, um, which is cool that they're taking the advice of the people who will actually be using the platform, but it's just taking a
Hmm.
little longer to get it up and going.
My favorite is when you can turn those elements on and off, because sometimes you
Yes.
have the kids who can like respectfully use the whiteboard or whatever you might
Hmm.
call it, and then you got the kid who is just like going
Yes.
like hog wild all over it and
Yes.
really disruptive. Or I have this one that you can type onto the whiteboard, which is wonderful because the other one you can only draw,
Hmm.
and you can type like whole paragraphs and like every single word that they're saying I'm typing, and everything I say I'm typing, and we're making the corrections as we go along, and they can take their little mouse and just delete the whole thing, and they're supposed to be able to have these slides to review later. Great times. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's change gears just a little bit and talk a little bit more about like your equipment. What has made your life a little easier, and what are you hoping to improve in your maybe like your just home office situation going forward this year? Like what you've grown along, you've grown a lot along the, I can't even say this, you've grown a lot in the last 10 years, like
Hmm.
as far as like building your ergonomic setup. But what about like other equipment? Like do you have anything that you just love? You had to buy your own keyboard and your own mouse. Would you
Yes.
recommend them? What else makes your life a little easier when you're working from home?
So I love my external keyboard. I also love that it is solar powered,
Hmm.
because so it's a Logitech K750 keyboard.
Okay.
I like, because like I would always have like, it has nice like touch, which is always a thing for me with keyboards. I had a different one, and it like made a huge clacking noise like every time you pressed a key, and it was hard to put. I'm like, no. Mm-mm. Um And this one also has like the keypad on it, which as a teacher, like entering grades and that kind of thing is
Yes,
super duper helpful.
same.
Um, and then I just, my mouse died last year after like my 10 years and grad school and so many things. It just gave up. So I just bought another one just like it. Um, and so those two things I are really huge to me. I cannot for the life of me use it like the trackpad on the laptop to like do anything other than like browse the internet. Um, and I guess the other really big thing that I have that I love is this like Verilux floor lamp um, that just has really good light because it gets dark. And I don't like to have my overhead light on all the time. I don't know. I've got a lamp behind me that I like to have. Um, but I don't like overhead lights really. So having good lamps and good light is also important to me.
Do you
So
usually sit in your office or do you ever like go do your grading on a couch or your kitchen table, like just to get out of the space?
I almost always just leave everything here because I hardwire like my internet, I plug my computer, like everything is so wired that most of the time if I'm going to be at home, I do stay here in my office. And because it's like all set up, like it's the right height, it's
Hmm.
the keyboard, it's the everything. So
So, like, when you leave this room, do you feel like you can put your work away then?
most of the time, yes, that's another reason really why when I moved here, I really wanted to make sure that I had a space for my computer and that kind of thing. I've really worked hard at like this school year. Um, like I set a deadline. I'm like, at this time, you will turn your computer off. Otherwise, like it's always here. It's not like I can shut my classroom door and get in my car and drive home, right? There's always something more that I could be doing, or a kid I could be emailing, or a lesson I could be creating, or whatever. So I've tried to say, at this time, you just shut her down. You're done. Whatever you get done it'll be there tomorrow. And like not having the computer like in the bedroom is nice too.
Yeah, a lot of teachers, I think, I mean, I've known people that work until 11 o'clock at night. Even when I was
Mhm.
substitute teaching, that one year I did like almost a whole semester for a teacher was out, and I would find myself staying at the school until like 11 o'clock at night. And is it easier for you to just be like, no?
I have been that like my first year of teaching, I swear I was at the school building like 11 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
Um I am oddly enough, even though I'm like in my 10th year of doing this, have the great privilege to be able to create the curriculum that I am teaching.
Oh, right.
And
So it's not just
so
handed to you.
it's not just handed to me. So I, again, spend a lot of time at the library looking for books and on the library website and just like scouring everywhere, trying to find things that are appropriate for the students that I teach. And so it is like, I can't just reuse, like, oh yeah, I taught this class last year. So here I'm going to redo it. So I'm constantly creating new lessons. Eventually, we're trying to build like a 4-year cycle. So one more year, then I'll have all 4 years done. So at least I have something to go from. But trying
Well,
to like just time management is a huge thing.
everyone says that. I'm with you. Have you ever taught anywhere away from your home?
I occasionally have taught from my parents' house, which is kind of cool. Like that's one cool thing is like I don't necessarily have to be in my house, even in the state.
Are they
Um,
close to you or is it a bit of a drive?
they're about 3.5 hours away.
Oh, wow.
So sometimes I'll take an afternoon off to like drive there and then have like a long weekend, but still like teach on Friday or whatever. So drive up on
Mm-hmm.
Thursday and then stay Friday if we've got like a 3-day weekend or something already.
Mm-hmm.
I have also on all those testing adventures, because it is Wisconsin and testing takes place in like February and March.
Oh, yeah.
Weather gets a little sketchy sometimes. And so, like, you always take your computer where, if you're going somewhere for work, you always take your computer, because
Just
you
in
never
case.
know. And I have taught from hotel rooms. It's not my favorite because I don't have all my things, but
Hmm.
it is possible to do.
I've done it also. My car broke down, and thank God I have my computer with me because you just made it work. And you just use whatever's in the room
Right? Yep.
to make it work. Moving lamps around if you can. So, what about your public school teaching income? Have you ever felt like you've needed to supplement that?
Yes, sadly. So I also work as an Usborne Books and More consultant, which is like, yes, it's selling books and direct sales and that kind of thing. But I also like, I love it because it's books and I teach English. So um, I love books. I love all the booky things. And so it's a good fit. Um, and I feel
I'm
like I can
actually
be passionate about it.
right. I'm actually familiar with that product. Our school has a Usborne book fair, book
Mhm.
yeah, book fair that comes every year, and it's like a fundraiser for the school to get more books.
Yes.
And the teachers just love them, love
Hmm.
them. And then, do you find that some of those are useful for your students?
Yes. So, again, even though I teach high school, I do like, they have great nonfiction, which is super helpful because it's difficult to find like good stuff that is. I teach really struggling readers and writers, and so finding stuff that doesn't look babyish, but that
Right.
is at a level they can read, and so I find it's Osborne's very helpful with that.
Hmm. So before we go, do you have any tips or tricks or advice for people who are just getting started working from home or who are kind of thrown into this, especially the teachers this year, just as far as like make it a little easier for themselves?
The biggest thing that I have really doesn't have anything to do with um, like setting up your computer, your space, or anything like that. But it's really about like, no matter how you're teaching, if I mean, like, if you're a teacher, no matter how you're teaching, you're a teacher. And so, um, like, for me, building relationships with my students and having my students get to know me, like, my students know I have two cats. Sometimes I show my cats on camera. um I am silly. Sometimes I sound like a game show host when I'm in my class. I'm like, hey, what do you think? um I share, like, just like, I have purposely shared, for example, with my students that I hate spiders. Okay, and they know this, and that is, they kind of tease me about it, and like, not a in like a nice kind of teasing, I don't know. But like, so there's things that we have that we can like talk about and share, and just like really get to know them, kind of see what's going on, because at the end of the day, like, I need my students to log into my class and participate in my class. And they're not going to do that if I'm boring or if they don't like me. So, not that everybody has to like me, but I try really, really hard to at least let them know that I'm a person and not like a robot on the other side of the screen, which I know, um, especially this year, like, for a lot of teachers starting out virtual and not having had the chance to build that community in their classroom, unlike like last spring when it kind of just came on them. um I think that's, like, honestly the biggest, hugest thing. Everything else you can figure out, um but like, we have to have our students want to be students and want to engage with us.
What about when they won't? Do you have to communicate with the parents?
Yeah, I send a lot of emails. I text. The other day, I had a kid in the class, and I called his mom, and she's like, "Oh, I think he's there." I'm like, "He's not." So I talked to him on the phone just right then. Yeah, I mean, there's that follow up. Sometimes the kids are not impressed with me when I do that, but again, I'm like, this is school, so you have to. It's school.
All right. Thank you so much, Amber. It's been fun catching up with you again. I know that you've got a long winter ahead of you here, so good luck and thank you for sharing your story with us.
Well, thank you for having me. It was fun.
Yes. All right. We'll see you next time. Have a good one. Bye bye.